Welcome back to the channel, everybody. We're in for a treat today. This is road race footage from the Beic Memorial road race that took place Sunday just gone in South Wales. I was happy to be on the start line. I was even happier to be given permission to make this video and to shoot some GoPro footage and to see what came of it, because I was going into it with a glass half full mentality. I knew I was in decent shape. Not quite the shape I'd want to be in, but I was interested to see how the calibre of racing had changed in the last 12 months, and I was not disappointed. Now then, let's get into this race and give you a bit of background. First of all, big shout out to the people that allowed me to shoot this video. Cardiff Ajax Cycling Club for obviously hosting this race, a race that has a lot of history. Geraint Thomas, former Tour de France winner, has won this race and is also a local to this area, of course, not far from Cardiff. This race is I have a lot of history with this race myself. It was one of the first ever road races I did, way back about 10 or 12 years ago. It's a great circuit, has everything. It's on the coastline, so it's a little bit exposed to the elements, a little bit of crosswind, all of that jazz. It's a really sort of typical British road race. And not only a shout out to the organisers, but a shout out to the people keeping us safe on the road, the NEG marshals, the static marshals, everyone giving up their time to be there and support on the side of the road. And of course the racers as well for entering and choosing this race to enter, because there are other road races on this weekend to enter. So thank you for showing up and giving this race the respect it deserves, but also, I guess, the level of competition it deserves. So my plan for this race, well, I really wanted to be there at the end, because there was a little bit of an uphill finish to this race. We don't see the finish line until we get to it, so it's another one that kind of keeps you in suspense. But stay tuned for the last couple of minutes of this video. Don't jump to the end, don't skip, because we're going to see the actual race finish, and I hope you enjoy that little breakdown. We're also going to get a little insight from a rider who's almost completely different to me. He's a sprinter, Sean Dodsworth, who is here with his Army Cycling teammates, and they were racing as part of a team, and I was racing solo. So we're going to get a little bit of a different perspective on this later down the line. So this race took us a 2 hours and 41 minutes, a really fast race, high normalized power, 290 watts, a lot of power in lots of different zones. So in other words, it was a very variable race, a lot of short power bursts, and unless you're in the breakaway, not a lot of sustained power. Now initially, we got started, the first 30 minutes was the hardest 30 minutes of the whole race for me. And I also produced my best 5-minute power of the race in this 30 minutes, and that was cause for concern, because I realized that this was going to be a hard race. When you do a race and it starts this hard, you know it's going to be tough. And this is testament actually to not just the competition, the level of competition and the teams, but also the youth riders and junior riders coming through, because we had a fair few junior riders here. Spoiler alert, I'm going to tell you the winner. Thomas Patterson won the race, junior rider, hats off, and was in the breakaway for the majority of the race. Now, talk a little bit about the course. Wasn't much in terms of technical sort of, ups or downs, lefts or right. There was only a couple of junctions. It was a really kind of safe route. A couple of portals around, but most of us knew where they were after we'd done one lap. Now, as you can probably tell, we're racing on open roads, so it's like a rolling road, not closure, but a rolling bubble, and we're being kind of kept in this bubble by the guys on the motorbikes and the race convoy and such. So we were really kind of made to feel like this race was living up to its reputation and keeping us all safe and allowing us to race properly, and not necessarily taking the risks that we maybe have come to expect. So we don't have any data overlay on this race. I apologize for that now, and that's because it would take so long to export and to actually match up where the power was on the map that this video would be out in a year's time. So I hope you appreciate maybe just the commentary and not so much the insight with the power overlay. I've given you some data, so I hope that makes up for it. But we're going to hear from Sean in a second. I'm going to hand you over to him to give you his debrief of the race for a couple of minutes. I hope you enjoy. Let's get into it.
I was racing this race, the Nat B, and I had two teammates, all racing for the Army Cycling Union. We didn't really have a plan. We was just reacting to, the plan was to react to whatever was happening in the race. I mean, there was attack after attack after attack, because the majority of the bigger teams in the race who had more numbers, they obviously wanted to force something so that they had riders up the road. And I mean, the first 45 minutes, I think I averaged like 320 watts. But yeah, a break went of a couple of boys. I think it was about 5 or 6, and the gap straight away grew massively due to the comms just jumping in front of the peloton, just because some of the riders were taking unnecessary risks, crossing obviously solid white lines and in the villages and stuff like that, which was more than within the reason of what the comm did. But what that meant was the boys in the break, the gap just extended and extended, which then meant for me, I was reacting to any attack, which again was absolutely brutal, following numerous moves. The final lap, I think it was 4 or 5 laps, the final lap, a move went off the front with 8-9 boys. I then jumped on one of the boys' wheels who bridged across, and then we stayed away for 3/4 of the lap before we got brought back. So I just sat in, recovered as well as I could for the finish, which was up that super draggy 2-kilometre climb. But yeah, I had no matches left at this point, and yeah, it was a case of rolling in with the bunch, and I mean on the back of the bunch for I think 50th position. I'm happy with my result, just due to the power I'd done. I think I averaged like normalised 310 watts for 110k. So yeah, on the back end of illness, I'm more than happy with how I done. So the level of racing is super high, and yeah, that's the race report from myself.
So yeah, as Sean says, much of what I have said already, and I have to agree with him on all points really. I did find myself at the front of the bunch on the last lap, which I thought I would be a bit more active in. The first lap, I was more about just feeling out, how things were going. Second and third lap, I was basically demoted to just sucking the wheels and just getting by. And then the last lap, I was more confident that I could maybe spend a bit more energy without really sort of suffering or paying for it at the end. Of course, still had this uphill finish in mind. But I say it's uphill, I mean technically it's not like super hard. I try to follow a move. I spend 1 or 2 matches. I do about 550 watts for a minute to try and get into one move, which fails. So after doing that, I realize it's probably not worth my effort trying to do any more. So I sit back, I relax. It's worth mentioning, the fact that a junior rider won this. And I think, we talk a lot about how junior racers and youth racers, they're that much fitter, that much stronger now than they were maybe 10 years ago. I think a lot of that comes from, obviously the training methodology and everything else changing, but the support as well. The fact that they're willing to race more and more and more. And the more you race, the more you learn. You don't have to be a junior rider. You don't have to be a youth rider. Certainly, the more you race, the more you expose yourself to race situations. And coming back to like my FTP and my fitness that I talked about earlier in the video, I'm certainly not as fit as I would like to be at this time of year. I'm around about 40 watts. If we talk about FTP as a big number, a very general number, I'm about 40 watts off where I would hope to be, and that'll come back. I'm optimistic that'll come back pretty quickly. I'm on a very fast upward trend at the minute. For those of you that follow this channel, if you don't, subscribe, because there's more of that geekiness and progression to come, hopefully, and I'll show you all of that in future videos. 40 watts on your ATP would make a huge difference, like not just from the fact you can save energy, but from the perspective that it's not necessarily the guy or girl that wins that's the strongest that wins the race. It's the person who saved the most energy or has ridden at the lowest percentage of their FTP, for example, for the most amount of time, who then has the most amount of energy to give right at the end. So you're saving all the energy that you can so you can give it more at the end. And I bring this up now because we're coming into the finish. This is the last 3 kilometers, and I thought I would leave this footage play because we actually come down this, it's almost like a ski slope, ski ramp of a dual carriageway, and you come down this like fast section doing about 60 kilometers an hour, 70 kilometers an hour, but then your speed starts to drop and drop and drop till you get to about 35, 40 kilometers an hour at the bottom of this bowl, so to speak. And I'm sitting at the back, this group of 50 or so now of riders, the breakaway is gone. I'm sitting at the back because there's no rush. I know it's not going to split at the bottom of this climb, what the situation is. And I know that if I stay where I am right now, in like 50th position, if I stay in this position all the way until the last 500 meters, and then everyone starts to sprint, I'm the type of rider that won't make up any positions, or maybe I'll make up 5 positions in that last couple of 100 meters. I don't have that kick. However, in another reality, if I was a little bit fitter, but I'm still going to do it anyway, as you'll see in this clip. If I move to the front and I surge off the front, there is a possibility that I either get a small gap of a couple of bike lengths, and we are going into a headwind, which potentially could help a stronger climber, if they get a gap, hold off the group behind. Or B, I don't get a gap, but I am successful in stringing out the group, so much so that I end up maybe shedding riders from the back of the group. So, not necessarily making gaps at the front, but making gaps at the back of the bunch, and therefore giving myself a better chance of placing higher in this current situation that I'm in with less fitness than I would ideally like. So, like I said, the best of this situation is to move to the front and either go off the front or string it out based on my physiology. If I wait and it just comes, and you can see here on the left hand side, it's mainly stalling. The bunch is stalling. There's 2 riders just off the front. The group are stalled and it's sort of fanned across the lane. So I just send it, and I'm doing approximately 430 watts now into this sort of mild headwind. It's not super strong. It's like, a couple of miles an hour, but it's still a headwind. And I focus, the advantage of having those 2 riders there is that I focus on them, and I'm just going to bury myself to try and get across to them, and then we'll look back and we'll see what happens. I don't really look back at all to see what's happening, because I feel like most people, when they commit to a move, they always look back too early, and it's a pet hate of mine. They look back too early and then they stall and they don't commit to it anymore. But I feel like sometimes you need to overly commit sometimes to get the reward. So I actually go all in, and I get out the saddle to inject a bit more pace, and I try and get across this gap as quick as possible. I glance back as we're coming up to these 2 riders, and I can see that the majority of the bunch is still on my wheel, but it's certainly in a lot more of a line than it was when I overtook at the beginning, which is ideal. However, this is where the lack of fitness top end, right at the end, comes in, and as we're getting closer to the finish, the group, or some of the riders in the group, are able to snap and do a clean sprint for the last 30-ish seconds to the line. You can see there about 10 riders have really got like a real sprint to give, and then there's sort of this second little bunch there that's split of another 10 riders. So everyone is coming in 1s and 2s here, so it makes for a thrilling finish, and maybe not a finish that maybe most were expecting, that we were just going to kind of ride up the majority of it as a group. I'm the type of rider who likes to take it by the horns in that regard and just go for it, and it creates a different type of finish and a different dynamic and a different environment, and I like that. There's a lot of risk involved, but this isn't the World Championships. I like taking that risk. I love racing. I enjoy racing. I love seeing what happens. Let's just go for it and see what happens, and that's what I like to do there. So I hope you enjoyed this video and this breakdown. We should definitely do more this coming year if we can get more permission to film these races. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you did too. And as always, please leave a like, please subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.